right, everybody. Welcome back to another live Q&A. The world is changing. The horizon is shifting. Minister Miller is releasing hints at what the future of Canadian immigration is going to look like. And Alicia and I, you should see on our channel here shortly, we're going to be dropping a new video that we just recorded that talks about some very, very critical things for those of you that are in Canada, those who are looking to come to Canada, both permanent residents and temporary residents, study, work. There have been a number of discussions, a number of podcast episodes. Well, there's one the minister attended with another group, and I pulled a bunch of nuggets out of that. But this is some unprecedented times right now for Canada as we're leading into an election next year. And with that, they're shifting. They're shifting in immigration policy. They're shifting in priorities. There definitely seems to be a doubling down on the economic priorities of the country. And to some extent, a little bit of a measured approach to our humanitarian commitments internationally, and the numbers and volumes of individuals that Canada takes in for all of the reasons that you guys have seen within the news. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that in the Q&A today. But welcome. It's great to have you here. If you have questions, don't hesitate to post them now. We will go through. We choose questions that are of the most benefit to the wide variety of viewers that attend. So take that into consideration. We also like to hear where you're tuning in from. So please give us a shout out. We love to do that. We love to see where people are listening and watching our video. And this is all about Canadian immigration. So Alicia, what is new for you these days as we lead into another weekly live Q&A? What's new? I think you're a little busy.
There are a number. So the fantastic thing is we get to work with individuals. We also work with companies. And so we have some corporate clients who are good corporate clients. And right now things are getting a little bit busy for them. So a lot of companies are reaching out to us because they have employees who have been here on study permits, who transitioned to postgrad work permits, whose work permits are starting to get close to the expiry. And so we're helping companies with LMIA applications. We're helping do Mobilité Francophone applications for employees who have their NCLC level 5. So that's giving people an option as well. There are people who are needing to come in on reciprocal work permits, or people coming in from outside Canada on like an intercompany transfer. So there are a number of different cases where companies need and they are going to support their employees, and we're happy to work with them to do that. So that's been keeping me hopping recently.
Indeed. And like I hinted, Alicia and I just did a recorded episode on the future of Canadian immigration for 2024. And as some of our questions already that are being popped in here, one of them from Bassino is any chances of CEC draws this year? And I think maybe we can give just a little bit of a teaser here from the minister's, his actual speaking notes. And Alicia, do you want to elaborate on this comment right here?
And so there's been some speculation about what this means. So definitely this is from a speech that the minister delivered last week on Thursday. And it does say, if you look down through this paragraph, as part of our efforts for temporary residents to transition to permanent residency, we will have more domestic draws for us. And by us, I assume they mean the federal government, and ask provinces and territories taking part in the PNP programs to do the same with their allocations. This will realign our efforts and provide a pathway for those who are in the country who wish to stay and contribute to the country and to the economy. So what we are hoping this means is that immigration is going to look at doing CEC only draws again. It might also mean that the provinces are going to somehow prioritize people who are in the province who have valid work permit status and can prove their residency.
Yes. And we've got a little super here from Marco. He says, with all the changes being made, all I can say is Francophone, Francophone, Francophone. And that is correct, Marco. And one of the pieces of advice that we give in our little video is if you haven't already and you really truly want to stay and you see that your scores are not high enough, well, what do, Alicia?
Learn French.
You do. It's as simple as that. And there's no getting around it unless there's a shift once again. And but but even that shift is unlikely in the world of francophone immigration because of the bilateral agreements and commitments that the federal government has made to the francophone communities outside of the major, outside of Quebec and some of the major areas. So these are commitments that they've put in place. And so without a doubt, Marco, you are 100% correct. Absolutely. All right, let's jump in and we'll give a couple more shout outs here. But yeah, if you, wherever you're tuning in from, we'd love to hear. So just post a comment and let us know. And then as we go through the questions, if we do not answer your question, remember that Alicia and I are Canadian immigration lawyers, and we can't offer legal advice, specific legal advice to you in the context of this channel, especially when you're asking, what do I do? What in my situation can you give me direction? Those types of questions we direct back to our website, and on our website we have a place where you can actually connect with us and book a paid consultation and get your questions not only answered, but get the legal advice that you need to make these decisions on what you do. And we're doing a lot of these, are we not, Alicia? Lots of people who are trying to figure out what the options are. We obviously love it when you guys reach out to us well in advance before the expiry of your permit. But I've had situations just this week alone where people have reached out with maybe a couple weeks left on their permit, wondering what to do. And when those situations, when you're right up against that end expiry on your document, the options and possibilities that are available and that we can advise you to do are very limited. So please, whatever you do, if you have a situation, you need assistance, don't hesitate. There's a link in the description below. You can connect with Alicia and I. We can provide you with strategic legal advice. Now, with that being said, bring on your questions. So let's jump right in here. We'll go to Sheba. Sheba says, hey, Mark, what are the chances of getting with the CRS score between 510 and 517? Any hope for next month's draw?
Yeah, and so we can flip over to the rounds of invitation. And of course, there was a round yesterday. We were looking back when was the last CEC draw. That's why we were back in 2021, because the last CEC only draw was back in September 14th, 2021. There has not been a CEC draw only since then. But of course, yesterday we had a French. So we had that Francophone
Another
draw.
French.
Another one, 1,500. Look at this. 388. It is basically the only category of express entry draws where you can have a score of CRS 388 and get an ITA. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the general draws, though, to answer Sheba's question, the prior general draw, I think it was 524. Is that what it was, Mark? Yes, 524.
Yeah, 524.
So 524, and if you look, before that it was 525, and the prior general draw was 534, and so it is inching down, but a lot depends upon the timing of when the last general draw was. So if they have a general draw, let's say they had a general draw tomorrow, you might have a chance at, like a 520 maybe.
Yep. It's possible. Absolutely it is. And when you look at the numbers too of invitations that are issued, that also pushes, there's downward pressure to, the higher this number, the lower the CRS score. And it's amazing to me, Alicia, when we look just at this year alone, we look at for French language proficiency. So we've got 7,000 here, and then we've got another, 9,500, and then another, 11,000 invitations have been issued to those with French language proficiency. And without going through all of the details with the CRS criteria, yes, there are 50 points that are attributed if someone has French at an NCLC 7. But there are also extra bonus points for a second language. So people are sometimes forgetting that. So in all honesty, there's probably, I don't know, another, what is it? So, well, let me just take a look. I want to see what this is. We're going to pull up the CRS criteria just so that people can see the true impact of this. So we're going to go here to the criteria. Then we're going to go down to not the first official language. Yes, there's points attributed to that, a lot of points. But what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the second official language. So we're just going to scroll down here till we get to the languages, and you can see first official language right here, maximum of 136 points. That's all fine if you're an individual. But then when we go to the second official language, there's up to 22 or 24 additional points that could be awarded if you're completely fluent in French, up to a maximum of 6 per ability. So if you have a CLB 9 or the NCLC equivalent in French. So when we're looking at this total, Alicia, that's almost 70 points. So this person could have been at about 318 or something like that, in terms of CRS score, core human capital score, before they got the French bonus points. So keep that in mind, you guys, that this is a real game changer when it comes to people who want to immigrate to Canada. And that doesn't even talk about the realities of potential work permit options. And I wonder, Alicia, if under the minister's intention to reduce the total number of temporary residents, if they will look at the Francophone program, the Francophone Mobilité program, the employer-specific program. We'll just have to see.
And it's possible, right? Because Mobilité Francophone used to have an NCLC level 7, right? So you had to show that you were a mother speaker, your langue maternelle had to be French. But now they've said, okay, if you're getting that NCLC level 5, that's going to be sufficient, and you don't have to prove that it's your mother tongue. And so maybe they will shift that again on the ability to get a work permit that's employer sponsored. It's got to be outside of the province of Quebec. But, right now, make sure that you're capitalizing on that if that's an option for you. If you have NCLC level 5 across the board, every single speaking, reading, listening, and writing, and if you have an employer who's willing to do the employer portal, employer-specific job offer, and you have to be outside the province of Quebec.
All right, let's jump in here to, this is a good question. When people feel their applications are stagnating, they're not moving forward. VK says, do you know if it's true that MPs, members of parliament, can help with problems with the PR file as an escalation point when it takes too long? So, Alicia, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so yes, theoretically it is possible. They have made it increasingly difficult for MPs to do anything. MPs have to schedule a time well in advance, sometimes weeks or months in advance, to try to escalate that matter. They have to be satisfied from you that you've done everything that you can on moving that file forward, and the ball is not in your court, or it isn't something that you failed to provide to immigration. And then even then, there's limited amounts of information that MPs are able to get in terms of what they can or cannot receive from IRCC on your file. So sometimes it helps, but it usually is going to take a long time. So.
All right, this question here, and this is a good one. Javon says, hey, Mark, I've started to study French. However, it will take about 2 years to perfect the language. I agree. That's a reasonable estimate of time. Do you think French will be relevant, I think is what he's saying, in 2 years' time? What do you think, Alicia? 2 years from now, and we're really looking into the crystal ball here. What do you think in terms of people and whether or not they should make the decision to try to learn? What do you think?
I mean, I'm a big fan of learning for learning's sake, for knowledge's sake, that it's a skill that's going to help you in jobs in Canada in general, that it's good for your brain, that it's a good thing to do. So I think it's worth doing it simply for that. In terms of what the immigration landscape will look like in 2 years from now, if there was a change in government and the new government said, we're not going to prioritize French the same ways that the current government is doing, then it's possible that they could start clawing these things back. But other than spending your time, I think it's a very low risk proposition to learn the language.
Yeah. And, I thought a lot about this too, Alicia. And look at it this way, Javon. Let's say you decided, it's not worth it. And then 2 years from now, people are still being drawn with French language. Or let's say 2 years from now, you've now are more fluent in French, and it isn't as big of an advantage, to immigrating to Canada. Well, like Alicia said, being bilingual and having the ability to speak other languages will not just give you an advantage from an immigration perspective in Canada right now, but can open up doors for you in the future. So if you have the time and the capacity and the desire and the determination, because it's not easy. I lived in Portugal when I was really young. Well, young is relative, I guess, but I was 20 years old. And during that time, when you're younger, your mind and your ability to memorize and learn is a little bit more like a sponge than it is when you get older. But it wasn't easy for me, and I received initial language training, and then I immersed myself in the Portuguese culture. And I even had a missionary companion he didn't speak any English, and I was with him for about 4 months, and I learned a ton from him. But that immersion, by the end of that 2 years, I became fairly fluent in Portuguese. But it's not easy when you're trying to learn another language. And so, it's interesting to note, and I'll point this out just as a thought, okay? If you are in Canada and you're trying to figure out, does this make sense for me to learn French? And you're on an open work permit. Right now, if you are living in Quebec and you are working for an employer in Quebec, that work experience still counts for the purposes of permanent residence. And there's no better way to learn French than to actually be living in a province where it is the primary language. And so if you were to make that decision on your open work permit, let's say that's valid for 3 years, I'm going to go to Quebec. I'm going to learn French. I'm going to really immerse myself in it. And then you build your level up, and then you move out of Quebec, because express entry, you have to demonstrate an intention to reside outside the province of Quebec. That's one strategy. Now, understand this isn't any direct advice to anyone, because everybody's situations are different, but it's something to consider, because it is hard to learn when you are not immersed in the language.
And the other thing to consider is minority Francophone communities, right? There are a number of rural
Good point.
communities that are primarily Francophone, and that is where the government is really trying to increase immigration levels. And so if you want to look at a province outside of Quebec where you can still practice your French, try to target one of those rural Francophone communities, because that's probably where you're going to have a better chance at rural or northern immigration pathways programs, or a rural renewal stream like they have in Alberta. So those things seem to be getting a lot of traction right now with the federal government. So that might be a way to practice your French and have a better chance and another pathway to PR.
Yes. Okay, let's dive into some other questions. So Stephen says, I have an ITA on Monday. Do I need to upload any documents for my parents? Do I need to fill out the same info with U.S. immigration application? Is there any way that I can book an appointment immediately with, I think that's with us. And we've already talked about this. It's pretty simple. All you have to do is, there's a link below, slide over to our website, and you can literally click on the link. If for whatever reason, Stephen, when you do it, and I know Alicia is a very busy camper right now this week, you can click on here and you can see what the schedule is. So Alicia doesn't have any availability this week because she's working like a crazy person. If I look at my consults right now, you can see I actually have availability. Oh, crazy enough, even today I still have a spot. So yes, you can book a consult right away, and it's as simple as just clicking on the date and choosing the time, and away you go. Oh, 3:00. What do you know? All right. So there is, let me just get back to the right screen here. So yes, so you can. Now, in terms of the other questions, Alicia, do you want to tackle those ones? Do I need to upload documents for my parents?
Yeah, so I'm assuming if you're doing an ITA on an express entry, your parents are not part of your family unit. They're not dependents upon you. And so when you are doing your express entry application, you would normally include a spouse and dependent children. So kids who are under the age of 22 and dependent upon you. Um, they do usually ask for details on your parents, right? You have to declare your parents' name and your mom's maiden name and their birth dates. And if they've happened to have died, then you'll put the date that they were deceased and the location. But otherwise, generally, you don't need to ever put documents from your parents, unless sometimes people have issues with their name or their spelling or something, where they have to bring in like their birth certificates and things like that to prove what their legal name is and any variations on their name.
Yes. All right. The next question here, actually, I'm going to pull this one up if I can find it. This one is from Niranjan. It says, hi, Mark, may I kindly know average cost filing C10, C11 work permit via your services? And then the response was, it was not listed on your fees page. And so for those of you who are wondering, well, what does Holthe Immigration Law charge for our services? You can see the majority of personal and family immigration, we have quoted fees listed. But when it comes to business immigration, every situation is a little bit different. And the effort that's required to put together, in some cases, a work permit like the ones alluded to here, the C10 and C11 from Niranjan, that's really a customized kind of approach. So the fees that we charge are determined after we've done an initial consultation. And I'll tell you why, Niranjan. The reason is because you may very well say, hey, I want to apply for a C10 or a C11. How much do you charge? And we, after doing our consultation with you, say, hey, you probably are not going to be successful with this application, and it's not something that we would want to file and take your money to do. We really, really want to provide you with the best advice. And so we may say, hey, you really should look at a labor market impact assessment, or, hey, you speak French. Did you know that the Francophone Mobilité program is better for you? So all of these things on the business immigration side, they are far more complicated, far more complex than the individual and family immigration programs that are very regimented. Business is very subjective. It's very, case specific, and it requires submissions, basically convincing IRCs that you meet the eligibility requirements, where officers have a lot of discretion. So there's the answer, Nurjan. I don't know, Alicia, if you have any other thoughts on that particular question from Nurjan.
Yeah, the other thing is whenever we're dealing with a corporate client, we need to make sure that that corporate client has done all their due diligence in terms of, do they have an updated business license? Are they properly registered? Have they done their payroll? Do they have their workers' compensation coverage in place? There's a lot of other compliance things that are required that we have to vet before we're ever going to tell that company, yeah, go and do a C10 application, because you need to make sure that all your ducks are in a row before you try to go to immigration, because there are all sorts of compliance audits, and there's some definite business risk if companies are doing things without a heightened level of scrutiny and due diligence.
You bet. All right. Mary asks the question, Mary Houston. She says, hi, Mark, did you try the CELPIP test, by the way? What was your experience results? Just listened to one of your podcasts with Brandy. And this is a great segue. So as many of you know, we also have our Canadian Immigration podcast. And this video segment on the future of immigration is actually going to be released as a podcast episode as well as on the YouTube channel. But we have a search feature right here, and you can see we're on 135, and I just released humanitarian and compassion applications when all else fails with immigration lawyer Ronnie Lee Carey, who joined me, which is also available on the YouTube channel. We did it. We kind of did a hybrid release with both the podcast and the YouTube channel. But if you just type in here, you can search by topic too. And so if I search CELPIP here, and let's see what comes up, here it is. Test taking tips from an English teacher. And this is the actual episode that I did with Brandy, Rob, and CELPIP. And I also want to point out on our YouTube channel, for those of you who have or have not subscribed, I'm not sure yet, Igor is going to be doing another live presentation with Brandy on this topic. And there's going to be lots of resources available. I also want to point out that in our Canadian Immigration Institute, if you look here at the top, and we just go here, with our express entry DIY course, we've got another masterclass that's coming up here just next week. We have to update this, but we do it every 2 weeks. So it'll be the beginning of April. In our masterclass here, although I don't have it listed on the actual landing page, there's a new lesson in there that is specifically taught by this awesome French language teacher, Jean. And I've done an episode on the YouTube channel with him, but he created a special customized lesson in the YouTube, in the Canadian Immigration Institute Express Entry course. And I'll just show you for people who have a basic kind of level of French, who want to elevate it. So if I just jump here to the Express Entry course, I'll just show you guys kind of some of the things that we've added. And this is, I think, in the Learning the Basics module. Let's just see here. Nope, one more. We're going to go back to module 2, starting with your Express Entry profile. Oh, let's see here. Oh, do you know what? I know why. I know why, you guys. This is what happens when you are, there's no such thing as a revision with the Canadian Immigration Institute. I recreated the whole course, and this is the course this is the old course. So we're looking at the Express Entry Accelerator. So let's see where that one is. Oh my goodness. I have quite a few, we've created quite a few courses over the years. There we go. Express Entry Accelerator. This is the brand new one, 2024. So you can see this is how it evolves. So not only do we have those 4 lessons you saw, but we have specific case scenarios for Francophones, and then best practices on how to improve your TF scores with Jean K. And definitely you want to check that out. And, you know, there's a lot of really, really helpful information in the video and tips on improving your TEF, and then a whole bunch of other resources and a bunch of other recommendations for improving and getting started with French language. And you can see on the list, these aren't, you know, surprises to people. Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, Assimil, and there's other French, you know, instructors, Michael Thomas courses, and then Immerse. So there's a ton. Even ChatGPT has the various voice features to help you. So, and then Jean helps you to take it to the next level. So definitely go check that out. And I just wanted to share that with everyone. So yes, language absolutely is a pivotal component to all of this. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to pull this one up, Alicia, because it's near and dear to our hearts, isn't it? Well, not really. It's like a horrifying part of our practice. So is my marriage certificate considered an official document, even if it does not include a QR code for online verification, but bears the signature and stamp of an authorized marriage registrar? And if I had a better sound effect here, let's see. I don't even know. Oh, I got the sound off here. No, it's not that one. Is it this one? Yeah, probably. That's appropriate, because this is a horrible thing for us. So, Alicia, why don't you take a tackle at John's and tell him why there's no way in Hades we're going to tell him whether or not his document is valid.
Yeah, so we're Canadian immigration lawyers. We can only provide advice about Canadian immigration law and what a foreign jurisdiction is doing in terms of their local family law and marriage laws is outside of our scope. There is no way that we could give you advice about, I mean, how many countries are there in the world right now, Mark? And then how many
There's a few.
jurisdictions, and then how many states, and then how many cities. So every single location has its own local law. And so when we were in law school, we had to do a terrible course called Conflicts of Laws. It's very mind-bending. But basically the principle is, if the document is legal, if the marriage is legal in the place where it occurred, so wherever you got married, and you can prove that it's legal there, then Canadian immigration authorities should accept it. However, you've got to be very, very, very careful in terms of what document you're getting from your local authorities. And it's not the marriage license. So sometimes in some countries, you have to apply for the license first. And then once you have the license, you do the ceremony, it gets registered normally with the province, and then you get the certificate. And so for Canadian immigration purposes, you must have a marriage certificate. And sometimes this involves getting a legal opinion from a lawyer in your jurisdiction to say, this is a valid document in this city and in this province and in this country. And then you're going to include the document itself and that legal opinion from the lawyer, and sometimes even the legislation from that country that says this is a legal document. And then the other big thing is translations. And so make sure that you have the original, and we went and talked about translations last time too, Mark, but you have the original document, no stamps, no nothing, in the original language, if it is in the original language. Then you have the certified translation, and it should be done by a certified translator. And normally they provide a copy that's stamped of that document. So make sure that you are doing this properly, because for Express Entry, this is one of the number one reasons that applications get returned as incomplete, that there's something wrong with a civil status document or a translation of that civil status document or the police certificate.
Estef G says, where would you recommend to learn French? So just like I said before, so Jean K and I did an actual episode. When was that? That was back 3 months ago. Looks like about 3 months ago. And definitely you want to go check that out. You can just go to the YouTube channel and you can just search up Express Entry, French TEF, Jean K, and that will get you to to this episode. And then once again, like I said before, in the course itself, Jean offers some free, basic free instruction to guide you, and as well as resources and links to access a bunch of his stuff. And he has as well, like I just searched it up. He's got books that he's produced that has for sale within Amazon even. So let me just share my screen over here. So you can see he's got Amazon and and then our video here. I just did a quick little search. So you can check out some of his resources. And yeah, I really like him. He's very, very professional and really good at what he does. So, all right. Dr. Sanchit says, hi, I worked as a paid medical intern as part of my MD program for 1 year. Can I use this experience for healthcare draws?
And this is a really interesting area. So I also had a consult with somebody who was studying as a full-time student, and they were also doing one of the healthcare occupations on a part-time basis, which was adding up to 6 months of full-time work experience. So the interesting thing is, of course, right now you cannot use, for CEC eligibility, you cannot use any Canadian work experience while you are a full-time student. However, as long as you meet the minimum entry criteria for either FSW or CEC, and you're not relying on your work for minimum eligibility criteria, so you've otherwise had a year of federal skilled worker, let's say, within the last 10 years, and you can prove within the last 3 years that you have the equivalent of 6 months of full-time work experience, I don't see anything in the targeted draw in the ministerial instructions that says that you can't use that, but you have to separately meet all the minimum requirements for federal skilled worker, for example.
And I just want to let you guys know that this is actually something that is, a strategy that people use a lot to try to, to try to get through the express entry process. And I'm going to shift over here in 1 second to Alicia. I'm going to give her this channel here. And then we've got a separate one for both of us here. But essentially, when people are wondering what to do within Canada, and you have the ability to acquire 6 months of this type of work experience, it could be the difference maker for you. Just one of the various tools that we talk about. So, and we don't see here, Alicia, if this, I'm assuming this must be outside of Canada. I'm just going to go out on a limb, but yeah, if it's foreign work experience, like Alicia indicated, that people often conflate or confuse the eligibility requirements for CEC with that of the Federal Skilled Worker Program. And this is one of the areas that people commonly get tripped up. Here's a question from Mary Houston as well. Is it a bad idea to apply for a bridging open work permit if I use the arranged employment points for EECEC? I know that I'll have implied status, but technically I could use the bridging open work permit to switch jobs before PR. So Mary, this is a consult waiting to happen, and we strongly recommend, and as I go through here, let's see if I've got there, I ring that bell that says book a consult. But generally speaking, I think what Mary's getting at here, Alicia, is when people in certain circumstances are benefiting from arranged employment and then decide before their PR is finalized that they're going to change jobs. Do you want to tackle this kind of at a high level? At least the high points?
Yeah. So everything can go down in a blaze of glory, right? So the risk on this is that if you were to do a bridging open work permit, first of all, sometimes people are not even eligible to do a bridging open work permit. If you had a nomination under one of the provinces and it was employer restricted, and so on your nomination certificate, it'll say whether it's employer restricted. If it is employer restricted, you should not be applying for a bridging open work permit. You need to apply for a bridging closed work permit that's employer sponsored. So be very careful about that right off the bat. If for some reason you are eligible for the bridging open work permit, you could lose your ability to get your PR if the reason that you did your express entry under a full CEC draw was that you had arranged employment with that employer, and that employer is going to continue to support you for 1 year after PR. You would have to notify immigration of a change in circumstance if you're working for a new employer, and they could say, you know what, we're taking away your 50 points. And if taking away your 50 points means that you're no longer going to be meeting the minimum CRS score for the round in which you were invited, then your whole PR application can just blow up and you can lose your PR. So this is a very dicey situation that you need to exercise caution about when you're looking at trying to do this.
Yeah, and I strongly encourage that you guys go and take a look at this blog post that Alicia wrote called "Can I Claim CRS Points for a Job Offer in My Express Entry Application?" She goes into a lot of the details, including what happens and how IRCC in some cases treat people that are changing work permits or changing employment.
And Mark, exactly. If you go down to the very bottom of that article, take a look, very bottom of this article. I actually quoted from people's invitations to apply, very bottom, keep going all the way down. It says, so when you actually look at that, it says, warning, if you decide to apply, your application may be refused and your application will not be returned. Some examples of changes which could result in a lower point score is you no longer have a valid job offer. So it literally says this on your ITA if you go and read the fine print. So when people say, oh, I'm just going to change employers, immigration won't know, they won't realize that I had arranged employment, or worse yet, if your employer says, oh, that doesn't matter, we're not going to tell them. This is not only can you lose your PR, it could be a ground for immigration saying you've misrepresented, and that's a 5-year bar. So they do note that on your invitations to apply. If you no longer have arranged employment points,